Hello, everyone. This is Justin Smythe from NextBigTrade.com. This is your weekly sector review for April 5th, 2024. Starting off with silver, which had a very explosive breakout on extremely heavy volume this week. As we've discussed in previous newsletters, silver tends to kind of lag behind gold early in a precious metals breakout, and then it tends to accelerate later on and actually outperform gold, which makes buying into silver early a way to really outperform in these big moves higher in precious metals. So silver had struggled after the Fed 2 weeks ago, selling off on heavy volume for the week. However, it held the 10-week moving average last week, and then this week just absolutely exploded higher. Biggest volume in over 2 years for the silver ETF, and has now broken above this resistance that's really been in place now for quite a while. And now silver has no overhead resistance. So silver is in a very bullish position right now, even though we're 5 weeks into this rally, or basically 6 weeks coming out of the early March low here. You could say that maybe this rally's kind of ran quite hard already, but breaking above resistance, as we know from stocks like SMCI and Nvidia, once we get above resistance, things change and markets can make extremely aggressive moves higher. We've got huge volume coming into silver, and it's also coming out of a big base. So there's lots of different factors that make this a very high potential breakout. And another key factor is that silver is now outperforming the S&P 500. We've seen silver, lagging the S&P 500 for about a year now, and now we're starting to outperform again. So this is still early in a breakout, given the fact that silver is coming out of a major bear market. It's just starting to outperform the S&P 500, and now it has no overhead resistance. So very bullish breakout, probably perhaps the highest potential breakout of 2024 so far. So very good new opportunity in the stock market right now in silver. And moving to the silver mining stocks, this is where there's an even bigger opportunity, because the silver mining stocks are coming out of a major bear market, and they took massive volume this week, finally blasting off biggest volume since 2021 in the silver ETF for the silver mining stocks. And again, this is just a character change coming out of a big base. There's huge potential in silver right now, and being such a tiny sector that again contributes to the potential here, with the rest of the stock market struggling right now. Moving to gold mining stocks, they had actually kind of lagged as well, not showing heavy volume, but in terms of the gold mining ETFs, but there was big volume coming into GDX again this week, breaking above resistance levels that have held for quite a while, since the end of 2022. Again, this is more bullish technical action in the biggest gold mining ETF, and you've got GDX starting to outperform the S&P 500 as well. So again, the whole sector is now becoming a leading sector in the stock market, and the market is starting to come around to the fact that precious metals are in a new uptrend now. Now, the US dollar was trying to provide a little bit of a roadblock for this precious metals breakout, but this past week it actually sold off with the stock market lower for the week, which is quite interesting. And now it's still just looking for direction. It was poised to kind of follow through higher and potentially really set up a big correction in the stock market, but now it kind of failed to move higher this week. still kind of in this trading range, and we'll see which way it breaks heading into next week. There's a couple different scenarios here. If it does break down and the stock market breaks down, that's an ultra bullish scenario for precious metals. However, if this support at the key moving averages holds and it breaks out higher, we could see a little bit of a pullback in precious metals, especially if the stock market is under significant pressure. So, there's kind of a couple different scenarios, but ultimately, with the power behind the precious metals breakout, I think any pullback would be a buying opportunity for the precious metals heading into next week. And the US dollar really is showing, again, closing lower this week is showing a lot of weakness where it should have really went strongly higher in a weak stock market. So that's again showing that precious metals have already broken out above resistance. They are already establishing an uptrend no matter really what the US dollar does at this point. Artificial intelligence stocks, bots, continues to struggle. One thing I talked about in the newsletter, and I talked about on X.com as well, was that PLTR had a news event on Thursday that during a bullish phase for artificial intelligence, you would have seen PLTR potentially gap up higher on strong volume, and other stocks rally as well. And the exact opposite happened, where PLTR sold off all day after the news event, and no other artificial intelligence stocks really got a bid off of their news event either. And those are the type of things that really indicate a weak market, where positive news flow doesn't impact the stock bullishly. That tends to happen during negative periods. So the sell-off that occurred again in early March is still holding here, and we sold off. Artificial intelligence underperformed last week big time against the rest of the stock market, starting to roll over against the S&P 500. Despite a lot of chatter about artificial intelligence, it's underperforming now and is really not a leading sector anymore. Another bearish development for the stock market was the breakdown in bonds last week. Bonds sold off on heavy volume, TLT breaking down below support last week. This is leading to higher interest rates, and this is what kicked off the stock market correction back in July 2023. Again, we've talked about it in previous newsletters. There's just been a lack of volume here. We've been in a stage one, basing pattern, and without volume, there's no breakout, and then the market is deciding to break down instead, which is leading to, again, higher interest rates. Same thing happening in BND, the largest bond fund. Again, we've got this breakout move on heavy volume in March that reversed the next week. Now we've got a breakdown on volume below the 10-week moving average. This is potentially set up to roll over back below the 30-week moving average. Bearish reversal in healthcare this week. You got this big bearish engulfing candlestick where it engulfs basically the last 7 weeks of price action, sells off below it, reverses a failed breakout here, and we've got heavy volume to the downside. Healthcare underperforming the S&P 500 since the end of 2022, and nothing is changing there. Again, consumer cyclical is one sector I talked about in the newsletter that's struggling now. Healthcare is looking very weak as well. All of a sudden, uranium was another sector that broke out this week. It didn't have quite the explosive volume as silver, but there's minimal overhead resistance here, and still fairly early in a new stage 2 uptrend. Uranium broke out in September 2023, and had its first major pullback to the 30-week moving average recently, now breaking out above the 10-week. Uranium is benefiting from stronger commodities and is another sector to trade while the rest of the stock market is struggling. And the other sector that's acting pretty well still. It did kind of sell off back towards the end of the week, potentially, leading into more selling pressure in the overall market. And that's the cannabis sector. Cannabis sector has had 3 weeks now of explosive volume to the upside in multiple stocks. It still looks really good here. It could have a little bit of a pullback to the 30-week moving average, especially on a pullback in the stock market. But overall, showing explosive volume that's remaining persistent now, coming out of its stage one base back in November 2023. You can see how the volume has just dramatically changed in these stocks, which has led to a new uptrend in the cannabis stocks. So I think the cannabis stocks still look really good here. It's another small sector, and it might be another good pullback opportunity to buy into if the overall stock market is weak heading into next week.